Good evening, everyone. We'll just give people a few minutes to join via Zoom before we kick off. We'll just give everyone another minute before we get into the slides and start the introductions and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so we'll kick things off. Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for your time this evening, for coming out and tuning in to this webinar on the Powering Up Dublin project. Before we get started, we'll just do a few introductions to your speakers tonight. My name is Jamie Moore. I'm a Senior Engagement Specialist with eirgrid. I work with the Public Engagement team, and I'm joined this evening by Enda Garrity, who's Programme Manager on the Dublin Powering Up Dublin project as well. Before we get started, again, just to thank everyone for their time this evening. We're really looking forward to telling you about the project and working with you over the next few months and years. And I suppose this evening's webinar is aimed at the community sector. And we want to reassure you in the first instance that this is only the start of the conversation in relation to this project. And we have big plans in terms of community engagement programs over the next while that will make sure that all the members of the community, resident associations, community councils, sports clubs, and so on are all involved in this process as it develops. And we'll be setting up community forums in that context as time goes on. So in terms of the agenda this evening, we are going to just go through the who, what, when and where, I suppose, of this project as much as we can at this stage anyway. So as I said, it's quite early on in the project, but things will start moving this year and into next year and so on. So we'll go through what's happening in the Dublin area, what this Powering Up Dublin is all about, what's our timeline, and the approach we'll take to consultation engagement as well. And most importantly, what we'll talk about this evening is how you can get involved in the process. And how we can build relationships going forward before we open it up to questions at the end. So just so you know, you can submit questions at any time during the evening. There's a Q&A box on the bottom of your screen here. Feel free to submit a few things there. And just so you know, the webinar is being recorded, but don't worry, your name, your image or anything else like that will not appear on any recordings that are put up online afterwards. The recording will be put up on our website for anyone who missed the webinar this evening to look back on, or for indeed anyone here who wants to refresh their memories afterwards. It'll be up there for you as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Enda Garrity, who is going to step us through some of the background.
Good evening, everyone. Many thanks for joining us this evening. So who is eirgrid and what do we do? eirgrid is a state-owned operator responsible for the safe delivery of electricity and on the transmission voltage level and reliable electricity system around Ireland. We develop, manage and operate the grid. We're an independent TSO and we connect industry and business and large energy users. And we support competition within the electricity market. We send power from where it is generated to where it is needed. And we operate the wholesale electricity market. We operate electricity interconnectors like Celtic coming online and the East-West interconnector with neighbouring countries, France and the UK, but we do not generate electricity. Jamie. So eirgrid's role in the electricity system. So effectively the electricity system is made up of generation, transmission, distribution, and down to the domestic dwellings and businesses. The generation normally will exist remote, perhaps to the city, often in the form of renewable wind, renewable solar, some open cycle gas turbines, and some other forms of system support like batteries across the system. EirGrid need to move that power from where it is generated, and on wind, this is generally in the southwest of the country or the northwest of the country, or where it's solar in the Midlands, and we need to move that around the grid efficiently. And that's done through the transmission system. And the model here is that we push the electricity up to the highest voltage level so it can move around the country as efficiently as possible. Then it's stepped down from the transmission system to the distribution grid. And this distribution grid is managed by ESB networks. And this is traditionally where it's dispersed around to businesses, to homes, and to a lot of small scale and large scale industries around the country. And then on from there, then down to the lower level networks, MV, and down to LV levels, which comes to each of our homes and each of our offices that we work in. Next slide. So what's happening in the Dublin area? So at present, the infrastructure within the city is just not sufficient for what we need to move forward to meet the climate action agreement. And in that climate action plan, we aim to have 80% renewable electricity available within the country by 2030. In order to do so, we must make sure that the transmission system is modernized and make sure that it has the capacity and the capability of moving that power from renewable resources to where it's required throughout the country. System security is absolutely key when we look at moving to 80% renewable electricity. Renewable electricity is not as reliable or not as constant as our standard electricity systems that we would have been used to in the years past. So when we move to a more renewable system, we must ensure that we have a secure, balanced system in place. And this means that we must be able to move power from where it's needed and be able to keep that system running. Demand for electricity is growing, and certainly in Dublin, the population is growing and the demand for housing is growing. And renewable energy projects are coming closer to the city of Dublin as we look at the offshore wind and other potential renewable projects around the edges of Dublin, specifically solar. Next slide, Jim. So where is this congestion happening at the moment? Where are the main problems? So on the right, we've got a map of Dublin, and this illustrates the major nodes within Dublin, which is Carrickmines, Inchicore in the west, Finglas in the northwest, Belcamp in the northeast, and our central substations and hubs, Poolbeg and North Wall. Of course, everybody knows the two towers at Poolbeg, because traditionally this is where the main heart of the electricity system was generated and dispersed throughout the city. At present, these circuits that join these major nodes are no longer fit for purpose as we look to map out the next decade. Essentially, power that will come from the south and the southwest of the country needs to get to the major load centres, which exist around Inchicore, some around Poolbeg and up to Finglas. And we must make sure we can move that power through the city. So at the moment, the circuits and the lines that we see on the right on this map are the lines that are indicating these are the circuits that need replacing and the substations that need to be modernized. Next slide, Jimmy. So where's demand coming from? Well, number one, it's coming from housing. Most of our houses now from 2011 onwards and from 2019 with the revision of the building regulations means that most of our homes now will be powered by electricity using air-to-air or air-to-water heat pumps. So this puts a large amount of pressure on the distribution network, which must be fed from the transmission network that EirGrid operates. Transport electrification is key as well. As we move towards 80% by the end of the decade, we're also moving into the market of removing diesel from our systems of transport. So this means that projects like Metro North or Dart Plus or any of the other traditional forms of transport within the city need to move to an electrical form of a prime mover. Heating is also key. District heating systems and other forms of heating systems will move and use electricity more. Large energy users, of course, Dublin is a multinational attraction for high IT and data centers and other such projects. So these require a significant amount of energy as well. The distribution level, consumers, of course, as our population expands within the Dublin region, so too the demand for that electricity. And also As we develop our city and look to make it more of a living space, we will require increased lighting, increased facilities within the city, which all require an increase in electricity. Offshore renewable energy as well is key. This is where the demand is. Or this is where the generation will come from for the renewable energy. Coming in off the coast, the northeast coast or the southeast coast of Ireland, this power will flow up into the city and through the city. So we must make sure that we have a network that's sufficient enough to carry this power. And on my next slide. So what is powering up Dublin? So powering up Dublin includes the replacement of around about 50 kilometers of cable through the city. These cables were installed primarily in the 1970s to 1980s. They were fit for purpose and very efficient then, and were up until very recently. However, as we look forward to our 80% renewable electricity generated from renewables, they no longer serve their purpose. So over the next decade, we must replace these cables and upgrade them to a more modern specification. We also must look at our substations. A lot of our substations were developed in the same era, so we must now look to expand those substations and modernize those substations, as well as adding detailed technology that will help support the grid at times when the wind is not blowing, or perhaps when the sun is not shining. We must look into technologies that can help support the system so that we can respond to those events. And we must identify new cable routes between these major nodes to efficiently move power between the substations and where the power is required. Next slide. So this is the study area, and primarily most of the work will exist inside the M50. On our previous map, we had shown where most of the congestion was, but it's Belcamp, Finglas, Inchicore in the west, North Wall, Poolbeg and Carrickmines. So effectively, we have a single circuit identified between Carrickmines and Poolbeg, which must be replaced, a circuit which runs to North Wall, which must be replaced, and from North Wall up to Finglas. And if power comes in from the south near Arklow or south of Bray, that power will flow up through the Carrickmines circuit and out to Inchicore and out to Finglas substation. Also, we must replace the two circuits that run to Inchicore because we have a high amount of demand and load via industry in the west of the city. Next slide. So what works are required? So from our diagram, we saw that there was a number of major nodes. These major nodes are linked by 220 kV cables, which are situated in the ground at present. Two of these cables which run north are in high pressure fluid filled circuits. These must be replaced with modern technology. And also we have three circuits to the south, roughly about 13 kilometers each. And these circuits must also be replaced. And at present, these are low pressure fluid filled circuits. We also have identified the need perhaps for a new circuit in South Dublin, which will need to link Southern Dublin to Western Dublin in some time in the near future. The substations, the main nodes where most of these circuits come in is Poolbeg, Belcamp. And also on top of this, we do have demand and huge demand at distribution level. And this is where we transfer the power down from the transmission system down to ESB. As ESB manage the 110 and 38 kV and MV network within the city, we must be able to provide power and efficient green power to ESB on that. So that'll drive the requirement for new substations, which is somewhere in the North County, somewhere in the west of the city, and somewhere in the east of the city. And additional capacity has also been identified in the Carrickmines and Cordoff region as well. Next slide, Jimmy. So what's the challenge ahead? So effectively, this is a as-laid map of the Harscross Bridge. And this just helps articulate the challenge that's ahead for us. In the cyan color and the blue circle, you can see one of our circuits which runs from Inchicore to Poolbeg, one of those circuits that we need to replace. And you can see from the map here that we have high pressure gas, low pressure gas, 10 kV, 20 kV circuits, telecoms. So there's quite a bit of congestion underneath the streets in the city. So we will have to carefully survey and carefully understand where is the optimum and best routes for these. And of course, all the way along that journey, we will engage with the public and the local authorities on what is the optimum and best way to deliver these projects. Next slide, Jimmy. So this is just an indicative view of what will happen during those works, specifically just around the cabling projects. So there'll be an excavation in the roadways. Usually the excavations will operate between 9 and 18 meters a day. A lot of that will be determined as well by the road opening licenses and what is offered on a specific street at a specific time on a specific day. But ordinarily, that's the pace that they will be going in at. The civil works will be the heaviest element, which is the excavation on the left. The ducts will be laid, it'll be backfilled, and ordinarily it'll be resurfaced and trafficable later that day. And we'll move on to our next position, usually occupying between 60 and 70 meters of space as we move. So typically on the roadway, we'll be taking up a single carriageway, and the excavation area would probably be about 1.1 meters with a working area of about 3 meters on that. Next slide, Jimmy. So what are the benefits to what we are doing? Well, of course, when we have these circuits in place, we have increased the security of the system within Dublin and efficiently allowed for power to be dispatched from different areas in the country and different parts of the cities to help support demand at certain times of the day and help release generation when it's most required. It'll be a reliable amount of supply that will come from the north, south, and east of the west of Dublin and outside Dublin. Meet the future needs of Dublin's demand and electricity requirements. As we move towards decarbonisation, the demand from domestic and business use on electricity will increase, and we need to be in a position to deliver that. Facilitate sustainable energy generation. At present, we need to be able to get that solar energy and get that green energy, and specifically that offshore energy off the coast, transmitted as efficiently as possible to where the demand is greatest. Contribute to the economy and future investment. And of course, we want to move forward and ensure that we have a net zero city as we move towards 2050, and ensure that we have the capability to provide everyone with the facility to be able to move towards a zero carbon future. And of course, with this as well, there will be community benefits for any areas that are impacted by the works that are happening. So what's the timelines for the works? So effectively from 2022 until 2024, we are looking at the feasibility and concept stage. So effectively, if we go back to the congested drawing, we're looking at what is the optimum location, what is the optimum route, both from a technical perspective, but also from a stakeholder and public engagement perspective. What will cause the least amount of disruption as we try to replace these circuits or install new circuits. Through that phase as well, we will be doing environmental screening. We'll be doing assessments, appropriate assessments in any specific areas to ensure that we're following all the recommended guidelines as we replace the circuits in their specific areas. We'd be aiming for, in some parts of the projects, perhaps in substations and a couple of the cables, to be starting the construction as early as 2024. Energization and benefit sharing will also happen within this period. Engagement and consultation is absolutely critical to what we do in eirgrid, and communication throughout the project will absolutely be essential. So we'll be reaching out to the community, reaching out to businesses, reaching out to industry to see where we can work efficiently, where we can collaborate, and how we get the best project for Dublin.
Great, thank you. And for that overview of the background of the project. So everyone, I'm going to talk to you a bit now about our approach to consultation and engagement, as we've referred to up until now. And I suppose to kick it off, I suppose at the core of our approach here, what we're trying to do is emphasize collaboration and partnership throughout the lifetime of this project, starting now. So some of the things we've done already around setting up the engagement forums is, most recently, we held the inaugural meeting of what we called the Dublin Infrastructure Forum. We set this up last month in May 2022, and this involves buy-in from chief executive and director level from the state bodies and state-sponsored agencies that operate in the infrastructure space in the Dublin city and greater Dublin area environment. So this includes organizations like Irish Rail, Dublin Bus, Gas Networks Ireland, Irish Water Enterprise Ireland, the IDA, Transport Infrastructure Ireland, the National Transport Authority, and many, many others. And I suppose the purpose of this collaborative effort in the Dublin Infrastructure Forum is to make sure that all these state agencies are conscious of the work that each of us are undertaking in the first instance, but that we're also working together conscientiously so that, you know, if EirGrid is planning the laying of ducts in a specific area at a specific time, there may be opportunities for other utilities who are looking to upgrade or add to their services to lay ducts at the same time. So, you know, all of you know from your experiences in communities in dealing with upgrades in your local area that there's nothing worse than someone digging up the street this month and then 6 months later they come down the road and someone else is digging up the street when the work could have been done together. So what we're saying here is we're not promising that we'll be able to align everything all the time, but what we're doing is we're trying to identify the opportunities where it's possible, where it's feasible, and where we can be a bit proactive in pulling all those different agencies together to deliver these projects and other projects across the board. What we're also going to do over the summer months, we're going to start doing a bit of outreach and stakeholder mapping and all that kind of stuff, building up to launching 3 forums in September time with their first meetings. So we're looking at setting up a community forum, a business forum, and an industry forum. And I suppose they target the groups like they say on the tin. So for the community forum, we'll be targeting, of course, local residents associations, community councils, sports clubs, heritage groups, cycling and transport campaign groups, and we'll also engage, of course, with the public participation network in the relevant local authority area and so on, so that we make sure that local communities are included and they have a voice and they can raise issues, they can get their questions answered and all that other sort of stuff. What we'll do as well with the community forum is we'll collaborate to deliver community benefit. So Enda has mentioned a couple of times there around the benefit that we'll bring to communities as part of this project. And traditionally we delivered that community benefit piece in rural areas. We're going to have to rethink how we deliver that in an urban environment, because, you know, normally when we talk about a 3-kilometer radius on community benefit, it's in a rural area that brings in a few schools, community centres and that kind of stuff. Whereas if you put 3 kilometres around all these cables in the Dublin area, you're covering the whole of the city and county. So it's important that we make sure that our benefit is very focused on the communities that are facilitating this transition going forward. On the business side, we're of course working with organisations like Dublin Chamber of Commerce and Dublin Town to ensure that we're reaching businesses across the city, shopfront businesses, but also more corporate office blocks and that sort of stuff. So again, that we're minimizing disruption to their day-to-day. We understand that you know, the past few years have been quite challenging as an operating environment, and we are trying to avoid and mitigate as far as possible adding to those challenges. And that will involve, you know, trying to manage works around really busy periods of the year or big festivals that would be happening or other big events, so as not to impact again on the expected footfall and that sort of stuff that local businesses would be concerned about. It's also about making sure businesses can still access critical services that they require in order to operate. And then we have the industry forum piece, and of course the reliance that they have on the work that EirGrid do in order to deliver on their projects as well. And as Enda mentioned, this includes the offshore piece, the large energy users, and just customers who I suppose connect directly to EirGrid or generate electricity and connect to EirGrid as well. So, excuse me, as I say, we hope to have the first meetings of these forums in September. And if you're interested in getting involved in any of these forums, keep an eye on our website, eirgrid.ie/Dublin, where we will be issuing a call for expressions of interest, but we'll be advertising it beyond the website, of course, as well, through local networks and all of that kind of stuff. So just before I move on from this slide, I'll just emphasize that, you know, we're not looking to apply a massive commitment on people's time, given that the constraints on everyone's times already. So these forums will meet very much at a quarterly basis in order to get high-level updates and input into the program of works that's involved here. And we'll of course facilitate more local forums at a geographical level where it makes sense, so that again we can have a grassroots approach to input, to consultation, to facilitation of works and all of that kind of stuff. So more broadly then on the consultation and engagement piece, I've spoken about the forums already. We will have consultation periods throughout the development of route options. So it's important to note that at the moment we do not have route options for any of these cables that we've mentioned this evening, and we don't expect to have route options for those cables until the end of this year or the start of next year. But before we make a decision on any route options, we'll number one, we'll have formal consultation periods where communities, businesses and other stakeholders can have their say and identify constraints and flag issues with us and give us their feedback and their feelings on potential routes. But we'll also work with the forums that I mentioned before to input into the design of those routes and those draft routes before we consult as well. So on top of that, then at the moment we're growing the team here in the public engagement space in eirgrid. We're actively recruiting community liaison officers for this project in particular. They will be our boots on the ground, the face of eirgrid in the community, where they'll be able to engage with you on a day-to-day basis, answer your queries, come to community meetings, all of that kind of stuff, and build those relationships that will be absolutely critical to the project as it moves on. We'll of course coordinate at all times with all stakeholders, so the community, the businesses, but also, as I mentioned before, our colleagues in other state-sponsored agencies who are carrying out works in these areas or have plans to carry out works in these areas going forward. Because again, we want to minimize disruption, we want to mitigate disruption as well. We want to be efficient and we want to avoid, as far as possible, any duplication of works and that kind of stuff. And as part of trying to do that coordination piece and minimizing that impact, we are going to rely a lot on the insights that our stakeholders provide to us, and that includes community level stakeholders, business level stakeholders, and so on, because nobody knows their area like the people who live in the area, like the people who work in the area, and of course a lot of our own staff live and work in the area too. So it's going to be a really interesting development of the project for us as well. And we'll continue the ongoing communications and awareness raising of the project too. So some of you may have seen the Powering Up Dublin campaign that we rolled out during the month of May. And we'll build on that and we'll continue to work on that as time goes by. We'll have project brochures, project websites, all that kind of stuff. We'll continue to have webinars like tonight, but what we're really, really eager to do is to have some in-person drop-in sessions and open information evenings and that kind of stuff, because nothing replaces talking and engaging with people in person. And we feel it's the best way, of course, to build relationships, to discuss issues and to look at moving things forward as well. So that's something we're really eager to do. And I think as soon as we have information on when we'll be doing that, we'll be releasing it as well, and we'll let you know. So what's happening now? So as Enda outlined, we are at the early stages of planning and developing this project. So we, as I say, we don't have the routes at the moment. We are working really hard on all the technical studies and identifying the various technical considerations and the constraints and all of that kind of stuff. But of course, we want to talk again to our forums before we progress into developing those draft routes as well. As it says there on the slide, we're undertaking the range of feasibility studies on the underground cable technology. So what type of cables would be appropriate for this, and also substation upgrades. So what exactly needs to happen at the substations, and all of that information, of course, will be shared with the public when we're consulting and so on. As I mentioned on the previous slide, we hope to have draft routes by the end of 2022 or maybe the early 2023. That all depends on how these studies progress. And just to re-emphasize again, we will not make any decision on the route of an underground cable or substation upgrade without first consulting and engaging with you. So how can you get involved? I'll remind you before I go through this slide that there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please do feel free to put in a question there. We do have a couple of questions that came in on the registration form that we'll go through, but yes, just to encourage you to do that. In terms of getting involved going forward, again, you might have identified a natural forum that might suit you. Please do consider you, or maybe you have colleagues, or maybe you have other members of the community in your local area that you think would be a really good contributor to a forum like that. Please consider getting involved. You can participate in any of the many consultations that will be coming up again, or formal consultations will probably start at the very end of this year or early in 2023. Come and invite us to talk to your organization. So we are really committed to being very accessible on this project. We don't want you to wait for us to hold a webinar or to hold an information session or whatever the case may be. If you have plans to have a meeting this month, next month, in the autumn, or if you have regular meetings and that you have guest speakers coming in to talk to you about things, please do feel free to reach out and let us know about it, and we can arrange for some of our staff to come out and engage directly with you in the space that you've created. And at any time, please feel free to reach out with any queries you might have on projects, and there's multiple ways of doing that. As I say, the community liaison officers for this project are going through an appointments process at the moment, and they'll have public mobile numbers and email addresses that you can email. But in the meantime, where we have a shared mailbox set up called Dublin at eirgrid.ie that's being monitored every day, and any emails that are sent to it will be answered. We have our website, of course, eirgrid.ie/Dublin, where you can find out any more information. Again, sign up to a newsletter or submit a query online. And then we have our consultation portal, which is a relatively new technology that we're utilizing here in eirgrid, where we will be posting all our consultation materials, be it project brochures, interactive maps, so you'll be able to put in your air code and actually see once we have draft routes where the routes are in relation to your specific house or home or business. And in addition to that, you'll be able to make interactive submissions on that portal as well. So it's a really cool new piece of I suppose IT infrastructure that we've rolled out that creates a really high level of transparency around our processes as well. So I think I'm going to leave the presentation there, and we'll open up to questions. Sharing the screen. Now, so, and a question that came in just before the webinar by one of the registrants, and I think you've touched on it already, is around renewable energy, and will this project facilitate renewable energy? Is there anything more you'd like to say on that?
Yes, yeah, renewable energy is front and center of these projects. I suppose really what has driven these projects is the development of renewable energy in the southwest, but more specifically what will come in off the east coast and offshore wind, but also what will come in via the southern coast as well through the Celtic Interconnector. And as that power flows north, that is going to drive these projects. So it is going to enable and uncap access and greater access for renewable energy within the city, which, you know, ordinarily was kind of limited to the areas, I suppose, around the southwest and northwest of Ireland that are benefiting most, I suppose, from renewable wind and energy. So really, it's the first time now we're going to have renewable energy projects that close and that accessible to the city, to make sure everything that we do is as carbon neutral as possible over the next decade.
Super, thanks. And And another question came in beforehand about how are we going to approach working with communities and the potential for community benefit of the project. And I think I spoke a bit about that already in the slides, but again, for anyone who's interested, our community benefit policy is on our website on eirgrid.ie, and it outlines exactly what our approach is to community benefit, how the community benefit funds are calculated, and the evolution of our community benefit policy over the years as well. So we've moved away from simple, straightforward setting up a fund, people apply and move on, and it's distributed, to a much more partnership and coordination approach, where we work with local community forums to develop community benefit strategies for their local area, so that the communities can prioritize where they feel the benefit is most needed. And then we collaborate again with other community funding streams and state agencies to deliver the most maximum benefit to communities as well. And I'm just checking the Q&A box here. We don't have any more questions coming in, so I don't think we'll keep people longer than we need to. So I think we might wrap it up there. So again, thank you everyone for your time this evening. We really appreciate, again, giving up your time to become informed about this project. And I hope we do see the list of names here on the right, again, in the future, signing up to our mailing lists and perhaps meeting in person soon. And we have one comment here from Michael Gary Keegan. Excellent presentation. Your approach to community benefits sounds very promising. So thank you for that, Michael, as well. So on that note, I'm going to end the webinar. Thanks all.